So today, guys, we're going to be talking about Larva Tiamat's kit, as now she's come out on JP, and she came to us rather early. We didn't really necessarily think she was going to come out before the event. We knew she was teased, but we, didn't think they would do that. And that we were just talking about how odd that banner is, because there's actually limited craft essences in that banner that are new, so they appear to be the event CEs. But regardless of that, let's focus mostly on Tiamat. Now, for those of you guys that know, I did a video earlier predicting Tiamat, and it's actually really interesting as we can kind of go over that in this regard. But looking at her kit already out of the outset, she is an AoE 5-star alter ego who's limited and buster. So that right there is interesting. You guys might already be thinking, oh wow, here's yet another one of these types of units. And that comparison is not totally off. If you're thinking, hey, she sounds like she's pretty close and just the alter ego version of Cuckoo, you're not that wrong. She pretty much is, and in that regard, and this is the crazy thing I'm going to tell you guys right now, she's basically our new damage king. She will out damage even Melusine at this point. So that's kind of nutty, especially considering she doesn't have niches coming into play really. But we're going to talk about how she's able to do that. So looking right here, her overall attack stat is not that strong. And that's what's pretty nutty to me, is that she still can manage to do all that she can do without that. So this is a really good point to hammer home that Tiamat and any unit in that regard should not be judged based off of one stat. Just because the stat isn't, 13k like you see in some crazy units cases for how high their attack is. A high stat's always a decent indicator of damage capability, but a low stat doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that you have to look at the whole kit to understand what they're capable of. And as a result of this relatively lower attack, she actually gets a little bit more on the HP side of things. So 14k HP, definitely nice. Definitely a little bit on the beefier side. And since we're dealing with an alter ego, that does mean that she's going to be neutral against a lot of classes, or at least semi-effective against a lot. So in that regard, she's going to be pretty nice. She is star attributed. Again, she has 104 star absorption, so not too bad there. And then star generation rate of 9.8%, nothing crazy. She has only a 0.44 NP charge attack, which is arguably one of the more interesting things here. Normally with a lot of buster units, we actually see them tending to skew the NP gain up a little bit higher to kind of make up for the fact that a lot of their deck is buster. In Tiamat, they don't do that, and honestly, I don't really think it matters in most cases. Most of the time when you're going to be using Tiamat, you're going to be using her in the way that you kind of want to be able to 3-turn with her just to be able to maximize that firepower. If something can't be 3-turn, that's a little bit more of a consideration, but there are ways around that, including kind of automating the charge over time. So in that regard, I don't think it's that big of a deal that Tiamat doesn't have a good NP gain stat here. In fact, this is a little bit low, really. She does have a 4% NP charge defense here. That's higher than the standard 3%. It just means every hit of an enemy that hits you, you will get 4% charge from that. So definitely not bad. She does have a little bit higher death rate, but again, there is one aspect of her kit that deals with that. So that's kind of interesting. Her alignment is chaotic evil. This should surprise no one based off of her storylines and such. She is an animal characteristic servant, a demonic beast servant. She is divine spirit, dragon, goddess servant, obstacle maker, which is relatively new, I believe, and servant and super large. So in that regard, she's got a lot going for her. And then she also has the levitating servant trait in stages 1 and 2. Now, looking at her deck here, this is even further more interesting here because she didn't get triple buster. So that maybe explains why she has a little bit lower of an NP gain stat here, because she's not just a total gorilla. She does get the 2 art cards here. And again, her hit counts are actually above average on the quick and the arts card. Again, your buster card here is just right at average at 3, and same thing with the extra attack. So nothing too crazy there. And it's a pretty overall balanced deck. So not bad. Now, looking at her first skill here, and this is kind of going back to that video, like I said, where I predicted Tiamat's kit. It's really interesting because she had heal block basically on arcade. And I talked about it at the time and said that this doesn't exist in mobile. So if they want to bring this skill in true to form on mobile, they're going to need to either change what it does or bring in a whole new type of debuff. And sure enough, that is what they did. So they actually end up bringing in our first ever heal block. But regardless of that challenge aspect right there that you can use, she definitely does still get a really nice charge per turn, or sorry, not charge per turn, charge in one big increment here of 50% on a 6-turn cooldown. So definitely nice in that regard. You're going to be able to get back to this in a double Koyanskaya setup. So I do like that. And actually, she's not restricted to double Koyanskaya. You're going to see that here in a second. So this also reduces all enemies' critical attack chance by 100% for 1 turn. So unless you're dealing with some super Spriggan out there, you're basically not going to crit against Tiamat for that turn, which probably will prove really useful in certain boss battles to come. So that is a really, really strong skill overall for what it can do. Her second skill here increases her own attack for 3 turns of 30%. And again, it is on a 6-turn cooldown here. So you're also looking at being able to pop this on turns 1 and 3, basically getting it back again. So really, really nice in that regard. And then it also increases her own buster performance for 3 turns, again by another 30%. So that's basically 60% worth of steroids that you're getting to double up on. This is going to lend her to more of a double Koyanskaya setup, because that does mean she has a lot of steroids that she can take advantage of doubling. And then she does have a 60% chance to stun all enemies for 1 turn. Thankfully, this part does not get affected by the level of the skill. Although maybe some people would wish it would go up to 100% if you did have it scaling with the skill. So in that regard, that's an issue. But certainly the fact that you don't have to level it to get the stun is at least nice. So in that regard, she does have yet another sort of stall, sort of debilitation type of mechanic that you keep seeing across her kit. And then she also curses enemies for 3 turns, again by an additional 2,000 right here. So not that crazy, but who knows? Maybe a day comes where somewhere in the future we start seeing something like Honey Lake, but instead for curse damage. So yeah, you might actually start to see some really crazy stuff if anything like that were to ever get in here. So having more debuffs is, even though it might not appear to be the strongest thing ever, definitely not a bad thing. And then we get to the third skill now, and the third skill is the real crazy one. So this recovers the party's HP by 1500. That in and of itself, nice, but not too strong. It charges the party's MP gauge by 10%. Okay, that's kind of good. And you might be thinking, but you know, we've got this block 50 charge issue, so probably not a lot we can do with that, right? You'll see. Then she increases the party's NP damage for 1 turn by up to 20%. And right now, as you look down here, you probably already noticed it. What the real crazy part about this skill is, it's on a 2-turn cooldown. That is nutty. So even though the durations of this skill are only 1 turn, that means you basically got 50% uptime right there. But it also means that you're going to be able to pop this skill multiple times in the same turn. So let's talk about that. The interesting part about Sea of Blue Stars is that not only does this allow for Tiamat to be able to sit there and keep popping it, but this also helps out the party. This also allows the party to get MP damage. It allows the party to get charge. So Tiamat can sit here and basically work in hybrid comps. So I've seen a lot of people work out how to Black Grail loop with Tiamat. And she can. And it's largely because of this skill. So to explain this, you already know Tiamat's a 50% charger, right? So again, I'll do the whole solve for 300 type of gimmick that I like to do here. So again, we've got the brackets here signifying our 3 turns. She's got 50% on turn 1 from her 50% charge skill, and she's got 50% on turn 3 from getting it back in a double Koyanskaya setup. Well, if you're dealing with double Koyanskaya, you're probably using both the 50% charges there in the middle, right? So that solves wave 2 because that's 100% charge right there. Similarly, you start looking at turn 3 and you go like, okay, well, what if I were to do something like, say, Oberon, right? Well, I could use this 50% there, but then any sort of 20% would be overkill. Well, maybe I could add that to the front end, but, well, that would require some party manipulation in order to have the cooldowns, right? And so a lot of people, I think, just thought like, oh yeah, she's just gonna be able to start from 50, and that is what that is. Here's the thing. Remember, everybody can have an append, a mana loading that they can unlock. So that would be another 20. So now you've got the third wave solved, you've got the second wave solved, and you're only 10% off from being able to solve the first wave. In fact, every 50% charger out there that has a 6-turn cooldown or less has this issue. The only ones that don't are the ones that actually can touch Black Grail already. They're only 10% away in theory. And then Tiamat gets this. And you go, oh shit. So you sit there and you go like, hey, now that 10% we were missing, yeah, that means you can touch Black Grail. What does that mean? That means you can touch Black Grail, and combine that with Oberon means that you can really amp your damage turn 3. Doubly so because he can amp the Black Grail's damage. This is why you have a new damage king. It's the same thing that Melusine can do. And it's really, really nutty. And this is something I've talked about, that with regards to damage numbers, I've seen a lot of people today arguing about how much Tiamat does versus how much another unit does. It doesn't matter anymore. When you're dealing with this and this combined, you're dealing with monopoly damage. You're dealing with damage that is so high, it basically invalidates most game balance and mechanics for other people. So, yes, Tiamat does great damage. No, you don't have to freak out about how much she does. But probably some of the weirdest takes I've seen today have been people actually thinking that just because she's an alter ego, that she doesn't deal good damage. They could not be further from the truth. And that's the big thing I want to emphasize here. Please understand, just because you're X or Y class does not mean that you're bad. That's the weird, connotation that some people get. The only time that a unit like Tiamat is really probably going to struggle for damage is if you either A, don't have the supports, or B, you're in 90++ content or some other sort of really insane challenge content that's limiting how much damage you can do. So in those scenarios, yeah, that is what that is, but you don't have to worry about that. Tiamat is still going to be really good for you. And remember how I said that you don't have to use double Koyanskaya with her? So Koyanskaya, Oberon, sort of that go-to setup for a lot of units. Just talking about this as well, you can basically set it up where you have a Koyanskaya, a Tiamat, and an Oberon. And that would realistically be all you would kind of need to do. You could make each one of them handle a wave, or you could still set up Tiamat to basically handle everything. You could essentially just try to start her out with like a 50% CE, have her charge her skill right there, boom, she's full, have her basically get charged by what was it, Koyanskaya there? Oh no, hold on, I actually did that wrong. Let's see. So it's start out with a 50% C, start out with an append, basically use her 10%, use Oberon's right there, boom, she's done. Then she has her 50% CE, then she has Koyanskaya's 50%, boom, she's done. Then she has Oberon's 50%, right? Then you have, well, actually, no, you'd probably do Oberon in turn 2 instead. Just because of the cooldowns. So basically, what you would do there is you'd actually pop the 10% on turn 3 here first, then use the Koyan Sky at 50%, then do another 10%, right? And actually, I think, oh wait, maybe I'm off on that. I don't remember, but there was some way to basically get it up to that. It may be, oh no, yeah, it was Atlas. So you don't even need it. If you used Atlas, you still had the cooldowns basically, and you could still do it. So it ended up being a case of, yeah, you can run it in any number of ways. She can work in hybrid comps for you. You can basically end up making it so that she actually is your devoted damage dealer, or just a wave clearer, or again, somebody that helps out while taking the wave. So that makes Tiamat really versatile. And we're just talking about the kit so far. So let's talk about the rest of this. Taking a look at her passives here, she has Authority of the BC for an additional 10% crit damage. Definitely nice in that regard. She gets Independent Manifestation D for, again, more crit damage, instant kill resistance, and mental debuff resistance of 4%. She gets Self-Modification EX, so basically just a hard damage cut that she always has. And then Goddess Essence EX, so just an additional 300 damage that she'll get on all of her attacks. And then debuff resistance of 30%, so that right there is going to be powerful. It's going to be hard if you're fighting against her to debuff her. And then if you're using her and someone's trying to debuff her, it's not necessarily going to work. And that'll get even more infuriating for the enemy in a second here. And then she gets Infantile Regression, which, again, is nice, but not the most insane thing, actually. Her passive just is what it is. Like, it's 5%. It's not the most broken thing in the world, but it probably does help offset that NP charge rate there again. So, not bad. And again, you start seeing how with all the charge that Tiamat has, why this just doesn't really matter. And that's where it becomes a little bit of an important thing to understand. Now, talking about her appends. Obviously, extra attack finesse is going to be good on someone like her. Doubly so if you're just going to be like somehow short on damage and you're just really trying to eke it out a little bit extra. Getting into the Brave chain or the Mighty chain, trying to get to that extra attack. Yeah, having the extra attack finesse is pretty much always good. The second skill here, though, mana loading, is going to be the one you're absolutely going to want to go for. And the reason for that is just because, like we already talked about, getting that mana loading, maxing it out, that's going to actually allow you to start from Black Grail. And we kind of talked about that earlier. You could start her with the mana loading at 20%. You could basically have her pop her charge skills. So again, the 50 and the 10 right there on turn 1. And right there, just from that, she's at 80. So you use Oberon's spare 20, and that first wave is solved. Then she's going to NP, and then what you do is you use one of the Koyanskaya's skills. And then, again, if you want, you can do the 10% here. There's no real big need to. Like, it just is what it is. And then, essentially, what you can do... I would actually delay it if I were you. But essentially, what you can do is you can end up popping Oberon's 50% there. And then that right there is going to be the 100%. You've got that 10% that you maybe delayed from right there, okay, into turn 3. And the reason you want to delay it is because, remember, it's only a 1-turn buff for the NP damage. So you get that. Then basically, now you have the other Koyanskaya charge skill. So now you use the Koyanskaya charge skill in turn 2 and turn 3. Because what you were doing is you were rotating the Koyanskayas rather than like trying to bring an Oberon. Oberon was always there at the front of your party. So again, you've got that, so that allowed you to get, again, now Tiamat's 50% charge skill back. So you've got that, and because you used Koyanskaya charge skill, you also get another. So you can double pop the NP damage ups on the final turn there. And that's a Black Grail loop. So it's basically start out the party setup with, again, Tiamat, a Koyanskaya, and an Oberon. And then what you're going to do, and yeah, chat's going to laugh when I draw this, is on the back line here, you're going to rotate the Koyanskaya for the other Koyanskaya right there. So that's how you're going to make it work, rather than starting out with both Koyanskayas in there. That means Wave 1 NP damage for her, probably not going to be that great in the optimal setup, but you're dealing with Black Grail and a lot of buffs, so probably not that big of a deal. Now, again, that's mana loading. That's why you really want it. That's what enables Black Grail looping. Third skill is interesting as well. Anti-beast attack damage aptitude. Now, there's probably going to be a lot of people that read this and go like, oh my god, beast class confirmed. No, in fact, actually, if you go to Atlas and look at the actual raw data here, this is literally specific to the beasts that you fight in story. So there may be another beast coming. In fact, I think this pretty much confirms Draco is going to come during the event. Doubly so because, like we were talking about, Umu's VA is going to be at the live stream unveiling, so that, you know, further confirms that. So maybe that's who our second SSR in the event will be. Maybe that's who the welfare will be. We'll just have to see. But again, really interesting there that you got an additional 30% extra against beast enemies. So that at least is decent in that regard. But probably not your priority because you're not going to be fighting beasts too often unless they really change up how the game flows. Then we get to the Noble Phantasm finally here, and you guys can see it is a 6-hit AoE NP. Now, it's Buster, so we don't really care about the number of hits in terms of like NP gen, because it's not going to be a thing. But remember how I said that she had 30% debuff resistance on that passive? Yeah, anytime she NPs, she cleanses her own debuffs first. So, now you might be thinking, well then why does she need debuff resistance? The reason why you need this is because there's one thing that can't be cleansed before an NP. And that's any sort of like immobilization type skill. So stun, NP seal, those sorts of things. If you can't select the MP in order to be able to use it, then yeah, obviously you can't fire it off. And if you can't fire it off, you're not getting the cleanse. But this does mean that basically no offensive debuffs will ever impact her. Her damage will never be actually like mitigated in any way, shape, or form, unless you're dealing with some sort of like uncleansable challenge mechanic. So that is really, really nice for her as well. And then again, she's going to deal all damage to all enemies and seal their skills for one turn. So really, really good, especially when we consider that some of her other skills there, like we had talked about, basically stun the enemies or heal block them and make them unable to crit. So just add in the fact that they also potentially would be forced to card now, not use skills, and then they can't heal and they can't crit during that time. And you've basically given the AI not much choice in things they can do. So really, really good there. But then the absolute icing on the cake here is the ability to increase Buster performance, activating first before damage goes out for 3 turns. So as you NP back-to-back times, this is just going to keep stacking. That's strong. We've seen this already with Melusine. I've talked about it numerous times, that stuff like this is just really good. And it isn't 10%. It isn't 20%. It is a whopping base 30% each time. So that is really just dumb, honestly. This is just absolute power creep. But yeah, this does make Tiamat really strong. Now, again, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the MP damage list here. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about Recurrence. Recurrence is Tiamat's Bonsi. And it's a little bit interesting because it charges the party's MP gauge by 5% every turn while she's on the field. What this doesn't say is includes sub-members. So, yeah. So she does have to be out on the field with it equipped, but yeah. She can basically charge your backline with that. Kind of nutty. So, is what it is. But, like I said, Tiamat just keeps getting more broken in that sense. Does that work if she's on the backline with it? No, she has to be on the field. That is the one constraint that they set. So let's go ahead and sort the NP damage list here. And remember, guys, don't treat this as gospel or anything like that. Numbers you see here are raw damage numbers. They're neutral damage numbers. And what it assumes is all of the unit's own buffs are in effect, but no, like, additional supports or anything like that. So it's good for comparison's sake, and the only reason that I use it is because I'm so used to looking at it that I kind of know where all the units have been. So I can kind of talk about where things kind of fall out. But again, this is really interesting to see that Tiamat's out, and Tiamat basically jumps right to the top of that list, sorting for NP 1 damage and sorting, filtering by AoE here. So really, really good in that sense. But obviously, you've got units like King Protea that just get stronger every turn. You may have other units that you've had more cracks at, like Kiara or Okitan, so maybe you have higher MP levels. But yeah, this is definitely solid damage. And again, this is where I'm kind of saying, like, I don't really understand where people are maybe thinking that she's not good because she's alter ego. Because even right there, she is the top alter ego, not taking any sort of niche or like overtime mechanic into account. So then add in the fact that she can touch Black Grail and she can work with, you know, pretty much the best supports in the game for damage amplification. And you've got some really good potential right there with that. So that's the big thing I want to emphasize with you guys. Don't worry too much about what number is what here or anything like that. Just look at her comparatively to the other units. Now, this also doesn't mean that other units are like trash or anything like that. It's another big misconception that I see a lot of people talk about. I did see some comparisons to Okitan today. They're pretty fair comparisons. She will outdamage Okitan. Now, the issue with this is mostly because, again, Tiamat being able to start from 0 gets that Black Grail damage. And Black Grail is, you know, even non-MLB is 60% NP damage up. That can get boosted by Oberon, right? So that's a lot right there. That's definitely more than Okitan's going to have in her kit. And then it's also a CE that if you do have it, MLB scales to 2400 attack, which is the highest in the game. And then can even go up to 80% NP damage. Remember, that can get doubled by Oberon. So it is a really, really strong and capable unit. Now, a bonus round here post Tiamat. We did get buffs to Old Man of the Mountain. I actually talked about this on Twitter. And basically, it's something I do whenever we get buffs or a new unit on JP. I just immediately like run to Twitter that day, pretty much after I get into work and stuff, and do a little bit of a quick down and dirty analysis of them. So the good part about Old Man of the Mountain is that, again, his third skill gets a buff, and it goes from Evening Bell, which is a 1-turn buster up with instant kill resistance for 3 turns of, sorry, a reduction in instant kill resistance of 100%. And it goes to, hey, now all of a sudden it's 200% instant kill resistance down, 3 turns of buster up, and charges own NP gauge 30%. All on a 6-turn cooldown. So this is strong outright because you basically have now the ability to 3-turn with King Hassan. We've talked about this before, that in the like sort of double Korean Sky Oberon setup, 30%ers are actually pretty close to 50%ers, because those 50%ers are always that 10% off from being able to touch Black Grail. So looking at this, you basically can start him out with a max depend, get his 30% charge out on turn 1 there. So that is going to mean you're going to need to start with like a 50% CE, but still, there's some really good 50% Cs out there. Cranking is now in the game on JP. NA doesn't have it yet, but NA still has stuff like Aerial Drive that could be really, really strong for you. And then again, you've got like a double Korean Skya charge set up there that'll happen. That'll get you to 100% for turn 2. And then here you go. Because it's a 6-turn cooldown, you've gotten it back now for turn 3 because of the cooldown reductions in Korean Skya's kit. So you're looking at him having 30% there, and then Oberon brings 70% to the table. So right there, you could back-to-back-to-back NP with King Hassan. Now, that obviously is going to depend on node structure and whether or not you want to, like, NP 3 times in a row and potentially brick the unit. But that does mean that King Hassan has a lot more options for what he can do. Doubly so now, it does mean you can slot him in for maybe like taking out a wave and catching some overflow charge from other units. so that maybe he's just a piece of the puzzle for you. Definitely having charge is never a bad thing. And I think this is a really, really good buff for King Hassan. It just makes him even more usable than he already was, and he was already a decently hard-hitting gorilla decked servant that again can basically be your challenge and survivalist type of unit as well. So this makes him really, really versatile. And then we did end up getting a buff as well to Davinci's first skill. So Davinci's skill went from Natural Born Genius, which was a guts of 1 time 3 turns at 3000 HP, and basically 30% defense up and 30% MP damage. But the issue here is the defense up was 3 turns and the MP damage was 1 turn, but they both had an 85% chance to proc. So that was not the best. In fact, that got mildly infuriating whenever Davinci's proc did fail. So kind of in the same vein as like with Tesla, a lot of the times when I used to do the lotto calcs with people, we had to again sit there and basically assume failure because it was bound to happen at some point in your farming. But Tesla ended up getting a buff here lately that made it so that he had buff success chance so that he didn't have to worry about the risk of failure. Davinci one-ups that. She doesn't even get buff success chance. They end up just changing it so that it's no longer chance-based. They just got rid of it. And that is great because chance-based buffs suck. RNG in your unit's kit just means that you kind of got to assume that it's not going to happen one of those times. So you hope that your unit is strong enough to still handle the content without it. Now, without the RNG aspect to it, you know it's going to work. And that makes it so much easier to rely on. So what they end up adding is an overcharge buff to one ally 2 stages 1 time over 3 turns. So this is now a targetable skill. It grants them gut status for 1 time, 3 turns, and now it's 3000 HP instead of 2500. Increases their defense for 3 turns of 30%. So again, all of this is targetable. And then increases their NP damage for 3 turns of 30%. So again, this makes it consistent, adds overcharge, and makes it targetable so that you can use it either on Davinci or someone else. Really nice. Makes it a really flexible skill. So another really, really solid buff in that regard. So again, I think the 2 buffs that came out right here are great. I think the banner that we got is weird, but I think Tiamat's a really, really strong unit. And again, basically our strongest damage dealer in the game as of right now. So really good. Highly recommend you guys consider getting Tiamat. Doubly so if you actually have the supports to do it. And if you don't, maybe just get her now and work on it later. Just keep in mind, we don't know who that other SSR is going to be coming up with the actual arcade collab that's going to be coming up here. So again, hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. Have a good one, and I'll see you guys for the next video.